Hi, welcome to Tech Tuesday number 18. Disclaimer. I want to talk about typical habits that we have and making sense of it. So when you meet a new client, an old client with a new invention, there's things that patent attorneys like to do. They like talking about alternative designs or alternative solutions. They like interrogating the client regarding the essence of the invention or the practice of the invention. By the way, I like doing it too. They love using the words IP strategy. They love talking about what else you can do with the invention. They like expanding the invention, whatever that might mean. Now, all of these activities can be practiced as what's called a cargo cult. I don't know if you're familiar with the story from Feynman, but basically during World War II, islands in the Pacific would get treasures from big silver birds flying in the sky. And after the war was over, they continued building runways for airplanes and hoping that that would call the gods down to bring treasures, which of course doesn't happen. But all of these activities can also fit a framework. And that's what I want to talk about today, is a framework which makes a little bit of sense of all of these different activities that patent attorneys like to do. Some of you might be familiar with the central dogma of biology. I bastardized it a bit. I don't like it, but if we really have to summarize it, information can only flow in one direction, from DNA to RNA to protein. And the only way it can flow back is through evolution. So what would the central dogma of IP look like? I'm proposing that you have a product. In that product, you have features that may be inventive, and those inventive features will turn into a patent. And of course, there's no flow backwards at all. And that is actually the typical way many people write patents. An inventor comes in with a product, they identify novel, valuable features, and they write a patent on it. I'd like to point out that today we all want to do agile development, or at least our clients want to do. And one of the important concepts in agile, and forgive me for mixing between agile and lean, is product market fit, which means that the product that you build should answer a real need in the market. So keep that in mind, and also keep in mind that we all know that IP should fit a business need. Now, these two datums do not contradict what I just described as a IP dogma, because all it said was that when you decide what to patent, you should patent what is useful from a business perspective. Now, what I have here on the right is, let's call it a triangle or a Venn diagram, and it really says that we ask for patents on things that are novel and inventive, that are critical features, meaning people can make a product without that feature, and that there's no alternative, which means that you can't replace that critical feature with a different critical feature. So if some one of these inventive features meets these three criteria, let's patent it. One last thing, some of the ideas I'm talking about were inspired by this, I don't know, Substack called Category Pirates. You can follow the links if you want. In any case, the IP dogma that I presented is wrong on two completely different counts. The first count, which I'm not going to talk about today, is that a lot of valuable IP doesn't come from your product. It comes from business needs. And even if we ignore that, the reason why we usually file a patent is because we want to block the competition. So the fact that we have a feature in our product just means that we know how to describe it, What makes something valuable is if a competition wants to do it. But we're not talking about that today. What we're talking about is that even when the IP starts from a product, okay, product, features, patent, there's a dynamic, a very important dynamic, and that's what I'm going to talk about, which is simply obliterated by the dogma. And we know that there can be a dynamic because a lot of our clients use a product market fit iterative process. They make a product, they see if it fits the market, they get feedback, they change the product, and so on. So, cucumbers are yummy. I hope you agree. If not, your problem. The problem is they go bad really fast. Every few weeks, I find a bag of cucumbers that didn't make it, and I put them outside. So what we would like is a way to preserve cucumbers. So here's a great idea. Let's make radioactive cucumbers and vacuum pack them in hydrogen. When we make them radioactive, we kill all the bacteria and slow down enzymatic processes. And we vacuum pack them in nitrogen that interferes with a lot of different types of decay. That's a great idea. In fact, people probably did it. But guess what? There's no market fit. Turns out people would rather buy what you see on the left than what you see on the right. So we go back to the drawing board and we modify the product. We pickle the cucumber in vinegar. Okay, that's much better. Does it have market fit? Yes. Is it a unique product in the sense that if we put it on the shelf, nobody else makes anything like it? Let's assume that the answer is yes. Can we get a patent? Yes, because it's novel and inventive. If people only had cucumbers before, pickling them in vinegar, that's definitely novel. And if nobody has anything like that, it's inventive. And now we ask, is it a critical feature of the product? The pickling in vinegar, forgive the spelling. Absolutely. If you don't pickle it in vinegar, it's not a vinegar pickled cucumber. So it sounds like we could file a patent, except I'm reminding you of that last circle, whether there's any alternative. Let's ask it differently. Does anybody care? Okay. The answer is not really. Why not really? Because some people believe in pickling in brine, in other words, salt water. And I know some people think that vinegar is a requirement, but I've met people that believe that salt water is much better. And then the question would be, maybe we can find a different critical feature in the product. And the answer is no. I mean, not absolutely not, but no. Why not? There already exists a market where people buy brine pickles. If we come into the market with vinegar pickles, then we are an alternative product. And we're competing against an existing market, which you know is an uphill battle. But in any case, we're not talking about a monopoly. And as patent attorneys, we like monopolies. So just finding a new critical feature, for example, that, I don't know, the cucumbers are green, won't cut it. So what do we do now? And this is really the most important point here. We modify the product because of IP considerations. Okay? When discussing how good the protection could be, we realize that in order to get good protection for our products, we're going to have to modify it. And here we're talking about cornichons, which you know are small and bumpy. And when you pick them up with your fingers, even if you don't hold them very tight, they don't slip out of your fingers. And now let's ask, is that novel? Absolutely. I mean, really. Look at this. Look at this. Is it a critical feature that they're small and have all of these bumps on them? Absolutely. Are there any alternatives? Yeah, you can pick them up with a fork. That's no competition. Forks cost money. Somebody has to wash them. Somebody can steal them, you know. Excellent. So let's write a claim for pickles with bumps on them. So the question is, are we done yet? Can we go home? Of course, there could be other IP issues, and I'm ignoring that. And in real life, we will probably do additional iterations that include innovation, where, for example, we'll talk about low sodium. That's another feature which will allow us to be different. All in all, what we have done is built a product market IP fit process. We've modified the product in view of the market, and we've modified the product market fit in view of the IP. Okay, so if you think about it, a lot of what we talked about the patent attorneys doing has to do with making sure that the client has product market IP fit. Now, I saw this phrase somewhere on LinkedIn in a comment, and I don't know how to find it again, so whoever tells me, that's good. And now we can ask, what is the next step? By the way, if you look on the right, it says in the middle, start anywhere, because like I said at the beginning, you don't have to start your IP from a product. You can start it from a process. You can start it from the market. You can start with the IP, not for today. So what can we do now with the client? One thing we can do is we continue to interrogate the invention in order to discover additional essences, except for the fact that it has little bumps on them. We can also look for other applications. Maybe you can use it not for food, for scaring away rabbits. We can perhaps generalize it. It doesn't have to be bumps. It can be lines. We can look for consequences. All sorts of activities we can do. Most important is to have layers. Why? We always assume that any patent we get might die early for some bad reason. And we want to make sure that when we have version 2 of the product, it will also be protected. So at the very least, we want to find fallback positions and other layers of protection. Let's talk about just one type of expansion, okay? So here I talked about expansions we can do, and here I gave all sorts of activities that patent attorneys can do. I want to talk just about one. And the question is, did we do enough with the main invention? And when I say main invention, the client who walked in, what he wants to do is to make preserved cucumbers. That's what he wants to do. He doesn't want to make items for scaring away rabbits. So what we want to do now is a type of expansion, and that's what Category Pivots is about. And you have to do it together with the client. And what you're doing is you rethink, what did the client actually invent and what does it actually mean? And as you can see in the picture, what we actually invented is a new category. Okay, categories can have more value than a product for perhaps obvious reasons. We'll talk about IP in a second. And the question that the client needs to answer once we've realized together with the client that he invented this new category is, do you want to capture the category? I'm sure you notice that on the picture on the right, it's finger food, but none of it has anything to do with pickles or cucumbers. Okay, there's tomatoes, there's cheese, and there's a cracker. So this category of finger food, does a client want to capture it? Let's assume the answer is yes. Well, if the answer is yes, the IP needs to do something very different. Before that, I showed you a triangle where IP was interacting both with the category and with the product. But I'm sorry, with the market and the product. But once we want to protect the category, we don't just want to keep people from making our product. We want to keep people from making other products that fit in the category, and not because of competing with us, but because we created a lot of value by creating this category, and we'd like to be the gatekeeper. We'd like anybody who makes any type of finger food, if we can, pay us a royalty. So the IP, instead of preventing people from making little cucumbers, it should perhaps encourage people to make finger food and pay us money. And of course, the IP will definitely be inspired by the product, but I gave you a big fat red arrow here in order to symbolize that this is where you should be looking at. So what we have is a client came in with an idea, and we were lucky enough to discover that he invented a new category. And we're also lucky enough to have a client who has a vision and is happy to protect the entire category and also understands that the IP strategy and the actual IP you do in order to protect the category is different from the IP that you need in order to protect a product. So are we done yet? And we send the client home? Not really. Why not? Because what we really did wasn't just do a category, but what we're talking about is that the IP needs to match the business strategy. So as long as you thought that the client business strategy was making preserved cucumbers, you need IP which will prevent the competitors from making preserved cucumbers that can erode our market. The minute you realize that what the client is doing is he created a new category, now you need a different type of IP. And of course, this category protection will definitely include trade secrets, trademarks, licensing, and so on. And what this really means is that in that first meeting that we have with the client, maybe the second meeting, who knows, when we understand or start getting an idea of what the client's business strategy might be, we ask ourselves, what should the IP strategy look like? And that guides all of these weird steps like expanding the invention, analyzing it for more essence, talking about alternative solutions, and so on. So, in summary, the iterative process is critical. Okay, it's not that we got an invention disclosure and wrote a patent. And it's not just iterative process in order to make sure we understand what the client is doing, but it's actually an iterative process in order to make sure that the IP fits the product, and more generally, that the IP fits the strategy, which might be good for him. Everything we do depends on what the strategy is. And of course, there's always more than one strategy cooking, so you have to collect the information. And the strategy, just like in my example here, will probably change during the iterations. Why? As you understand the invention better, as you understand the market better, you understand more what can be done. So that completes what I wanted to talk about, which is product market IP fit, and more generally, IP strategy, IP business fit. And here's an example of a question that you might want to answer. So I have here 5 inventions, and for each one of them, you can ask yourself, what is a good product market IP fit, and what is a good product category IP fit? And as a bonus, maybe you can suggest a strategy different from just new product or new category. So here's an example. If you have beer in cans rather than beer in glass containers. Question you might ask yourself, are we just having a cheaper way of delivering beer? Or perhaps we have an opportunity to convince sports stadium managers to only allow our beer to come in because beer cans can't break into glass shards, which are rather dangerous when you get into fights. B is a word processor that writes letters for you. Today it's a common thing. Is it still a word processor? Maybe you invented a new category. Okay, so that was me talking, and I'm stopping the recording.